Dreamliner falls after takeoff tragedy. Boeing 787 Dreamliner crashes seconds after takeoff. 244 on board, including 53 Britons. Boeing 787 Dreamliner, carrying 244 passengers and crew, crashed in a densely populated area just minutes after takeoff. The Gatwick-bound flight AI171 went down approximately at 1:38 p.m., sending flaming wreckage and thick smoke into the air as emergency responders scrambled to the scene. The flight carried 244 passengers and crew members, including 53 Britons nationals, along with Canadians and Portuguese. Now let's deep dive into this AI podcast.
Okay. Let's get into this. We've got a pile of source material here. First, news out, some expert thoughts, official lines, flight data, all focused on this really awful event that just happened.
Yeah, the Air India Flight AI171 crash. It was a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. And the sources all confirm it went down really soon after taking off from Ahmedabad in India. Happened earlier today, Wednesday, June 12th.
And what we want to do here in this deep dive is sort of sift through that first wave of information, help you understand what seems to be known right now based purely on these documents we have in front of us.
Exactly, taking the raw info and trying to piece together the initial picture. So let's see what these reports actually lay out.
Okay, so the basics first. Air India Flight AI171. The plane was a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. It was meant to fly all the way to Gatwick in London.
Right, a long-haul flight. And the time of the crash, the sources seem to agree, was around 1:38 p.m. India time. That's just after 9 a.m. UK time, 09:08 BST.
The shocking thing is where it crashed, not out in some field, but right back into Ahmedabad.
Yeah, into a really densely populated area. Specifically, it seems, a doctor's hostel, part of the BJ Medical College and Civil Hospital complex in the Megani neighborhood.
I mean, the location alone tells you this was catastrophic, not just for the plane, but for people on the ground, too.
Absolutely. And the descriptions coming from the scene, well, they're grim. They talk about, flaming wreckage, incredibly thick smoke, just twisted metal everywhere.
Parts of the plane itself, fuselage, landing gear, the tail, wings apparently embedded right in the debris of the hostel building.
There's one detail in a report that really paints a picture. An image described of a huge hole smashed into a canteen wall in the hostel.
Oh, yeah.
And inside, you could see half-eaten meals still on the benches. Just shows how incredibly sudden and violent it must have been.
Yeah, absolutely chilling. And that suddenness is reflected in the initial casualty figures, too, sadly.
It is. The first responders recovered at least 30 bodies initially, but the reports are very clear. That number is expected to climb. It affects people on the plane and on the ground.
Police sources confirmed the main impact was the hostel building, and they mentioned efforts to clear the area, saying something like 70 to 80% was cleared as the rescue work went on.
So what about the flight itself? What happened in those moments after takeoff? The sources mention Flight Radar 24 data.
Right, and that data shows the plane only got up to about 625 feet.
625 feet. I mean, for a big jet like a 787 setting off for London, that's incredibly low to start descending from. It was barely airborne.
And there's video, too, apparently, mentioned in the reports, showing the plane flying really low.
Yeah, and crucially, nose up, with the landing gear still down.
Which suggests what? An attempt to return.
It strongly suggests they knew something was critically wrong almost immediately after takeoff. That configuration, nose high, gear down, points towards trying to manage an emergency, maybe attempting to get back to the airport.
And confirming that sense of emergency, India's aviation authority, the DGCA, they confirmed a Mayday call, didn't they?
They did. A Mayday call came from the aircraft just shortly before it crashed. So the crew absolutely knew they were in dire straits.
And the impact, described as a massive fireball.
Well, yeah. It would have been loaded with fuel for the long flight to London. That amount of jet fuel would explain the intensity of the fire we saw in the images.
Let's talk about the people on board. Air India confirmed the total number.
Yes, 244 souls on board.
Yeah.
That includes both passengers and the crew.
And the sources give a breakdown of nationalities for the passengers.
They do. Primarily Indian nationals, 169. Then 53 British citizens, 1 Canadian, and 7 Portuguese nationals mentioned.
And the flight crew. We have names.
We do. The pilots were Captain Sumit Sabarwal. The sources say he had over 8,200 flying hours, so very experienced.
Okay.
And First Officer Clive Kundar with 1,100 hours. The reports we have describe both as experienced and, competent pilots.
So you have this picture, experienced crew, Plane barely gets airborne, mayday call, looks like they're trying to turn back. What are the initial thoughts from experts in these sources about what could have caused this?
Well, there are a couple of perspectives emerging already. One source quotes Lieutenant Colonel John R. Davidson, an aviation safety consultant.
And what does he say?
He calls that flight path highly irregular, given how short a time it was in the air. Based on that, he lists a few possibilities. Things like engine thrust loss, maybe an incorrect flap or trim setting for takeoff, maybe the plane was overweight, or some kind of critical failure, mechanical or electronic, a range of things, really.
But there's another theory mentioned, too.
Yes, from a former airline pilot, Saurabh Bhatnagar. His initial take, the report calls it his prima facie view, is quite specific.
Which is?
He suggests it looks like multiple bird strikes causing both engines to lose power.
Both engines, wow. And does he connect that to the flight path?
He does. He interprets the descent, based on the data, as appearing controlled, suggesting the pilots were actually managing an emergency landing attempt after losing engine power before things went catastrophically wrong.
So, interesting. Right away, you have experts looking at the same initial data and proposing different potential primary causes, mechanical failure versus external factors like bird strikes.
Exactly. It highlights how early it is in the process.
Okay, let's shift to the reactions. This has obviously sent shockwaves. What are the reports saying about official responses?
Widespread, as you expect. From the UK, Foreign Secretary David Lammy and Prime Minister Keir Starmer expressed sorrow.
And in India.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and Gujarat, where Ahmedabad is his home state. He called it heartbreaking. He's directed government agencies to give all possible help.
India's civil aviation minister, too.
Yes, Ram Mohan Naidu. He stated they're on highest alert. Rescue teams were mobilized immediately, a very rapid response.
And the airline itself, Air India, and its parent company, the Tata Group.
Their chairman, Natarajan Chandrasekaran, put out a statement, expressed deep sorrow, said the focus right now is on supporting the emergency crews and, crucially, assisting the families of the victims.
Right.
And the Tata Group, they've actually set up an emergency support center to coordinate that aid.
Which leads us to the investigation. That's the critical next step.
Absolutely. And it's already underway. India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, the AAIB, has sent a team straight to the site.
And given the plane is American-made, Boeing, and there were 4 nationals on board.
We expect international help.
Yeah.
Standard procedure, the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, and the UK's Air Accidents Investigation Branch, the AAIB, are expected to assist the Indian authorities.
That makes sense. There's also a mention in one source about the legal side of things.
Yeah, a quick note from an aviation attorney, Peter Neenan. He just points out that depending on what the investigation finds, the cause, any contributing factors, families affected, might have legal rights under different jurisdictions. Could be Indian law, UK law, maybe even U.S. law. But that's obviously way down the line.
Now, there's a broader context here that some of the sources are highlighting, which feels impossible to ignore.
You mean Boeing's recent safety record?
Exactly. This crash tragically happens while there's already significant scrutiny on Boeing.
It does, although it's important to know what the sources also say about the 787 Dreamliner specifically. It's generally seen as having, advanced safety features, a pretty strong operational history since it came out in 2009.
And this is believed to be the first fatal crash involving a 787, right?
That's what the reports indicate. Yes, first fatal crash for this particular model.
The context is those other recent Boeing crashes. The sources list them.
They do. The 2 737MX crashes, Lion Air in late 2018, Ethiopian Airlines in early 2019. Terrible losses of life there.
And another one more recently.
Yes, a 737 crash reported in South Korea January of this year, 2025, also with a high death toll, 179 people.
So this 787 crash, even if it's the first for the model, lands amidst those existing concerns?
Unavoidably, yes. And the market reaction reflects that sensitivity. Boeing shares reportedly dropped about 8% in pre-market trading in the U.S. after the news broke.
And Boeing's own response so far?
A pretty standard initial statement. They're aware of the incident. They're gathering more information, ready to support the investigation.
Okay. And just a couple of final points from the immediate aftermath. Ahmedabad Airport.
Operations were suspended immediately after the crash. Standard procedure again, but obviously disruptive.
And the timing. just before a major industry event.
Yeah, kind of poignant or maybe awkward timing. It's just days before the Paris Air Show is supposed to start. That's a huge deal for the aerospace industry.
Right, creates a very somber backdrop for that event. So, okay, let's just quickly pull together what we know from these initial sources. Air India AI171, a 787 Dreamliner, crashed in Ahmedabad right after takeoff, hitting a doctor's hostel.
Terrible impact. Significant loss of life confirmed already, expected to rise, affecting people both on the plane and on the ground. We know it reached only a very low altitude. A mayday call was made.
And the initial expert theories mentioned point towards either major engine issues, possibly bird strikes, or maybe other mechanical or configuration problems, but nothing definite yet.
No, not at all. The formal investigation, led by India with international help, is just beginning.
And all this happens, as we said, against that wider backdrop of recent Boeing incidents, even though this specific 787 model hasn't had a fatal crash before now.
It's a really complex, tragic situation unfolding from these first pieces of information.
Absolutely. Which leads to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to maybe ponder as more details emerge. Think about how investigators actually build the story of what happened here. They have these fragments we've talked about, the flight data recorder, the cockpit voice recorder if they recover it, the physical wreckage, witness statements, that Mayday call, maybe even weather reports or bird activity logs.
It's like putting together an incredibly complex, high-stakes jigsaw puzzle.
Exactly. And how do those initial expert ideas we heard, the bird strike theory versus potential mechanical issues, how do those first interpretations shape the narrative before the hard evidence is fully analyzed? As you hear more about this in the coming days and weeks, what specific detail from this initial reporting strikes you as potentially the most critical piece investigators need to understand to figure out why this flight ended so tragically so soon after it began?
What do you think could have gone wrong just seconds after takeoff in such a modern aircraft like Boeing 787 Dreamliner? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.